Hey there, this is Paula from the Afford Anything podcast, and the interview that you are about to hear is special bonus material that I recorded live on stereo. So if you want to hear my special live stereo interviews, head to stereo.com/paulapant, download the app, follow me there, and you can listen to these interviews live. Now, with that said, on to the show.
Hello.
Hey, Alyssa, how are you?
I'm awesome. How are you, Paula?
I feel like it's been forever since we've spoken.
A whole 28 minutes.
Well, so even though we did just talk, I didn't get to ask you about your experience going to Memphis. You just came back from Memphis the other day and you were looking at a rental property there. So tell me the story.
Sure. So I was planning on going to Memphis around this time. I'm a teacher and I'm on spring break from classes. And so I had kind of put that in my schedule already. And I wanted to get down there, get some boots on the ground, and see the neighborhoods that I was interested in person. So it was actually a coincidence that we ended up being under contract on a property at the same time, which was awesome that it worked out like that. And it was really helpful, I think, as an out-of-state investor investing in a city that I've never been to see firsthand the difference between the neighborhoods and the conditions of the properties within them. And it confirmed that we are looking in the correct places, which was really comforting. That was like, yes, these are exactly the types of neighborhoods that I was hoping to invest in. So it brought a lot of clarification, both on that and the property that we were under contract on. So I was looking for something that was basically rent ready. I didn't want to start with a total renovation job. And we got the results of the inspection as we were driving down to Memphis. And it was pretty clear right away that it wasn't a good fit. There were foundation issues, rotting joists, squishy floors, and such. And then the roof also needed to be replaced, and it had sagging decking as well. And it looked like there was evidence of roof leaks. And the roof didn't concern me that much. I've replaced a roof and all of the decking on my primary residence, and so I wasn't daunted by that. But the foundation issues, I knew that I wasn't prepared to tackle that. And I was aware that that could get very expensive very quickly.
Wow. Okay, so let's back up. Like I didn't realize that this wasn't just this wasn't just a trip to Memphis to look at the property that you were under contract for. This is your first scouting trip.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, so
Yeah.
let's back up even further than that. So how did you decide to invest in Memphis, um, literally having never been there before?
That's a great question. So I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, and I started my journey there because after taking your first rental property, you suggested starting in a location you were familiar with, or you might visit, you might have family or friends. And there was a possibility of doing an off-market deal and buying a property from a family member. And so I started there, and I quickly realized that that ship has sailed, and the deal didn't go through. It ended up not really being an option. But I love Tennessee. I love my home state. And I was thinking, well, let's just expand away from Nashville a little bit. And so I started looking in Clarksville, which is about an hour away. And then I looked a little bit in Chattanooga. I called to put an offer in on a duplex there last March. And then it got taken off the market right as COVID started. So I was bummed about that. And I looked at some other cities in Tennessee, and then I just ran some numbers on Memphis. and had done a little bit of research to know that people were investing there. And I think what initially drew my eye was how inexpensive the properties were. And as a teacher, we're not high income earners, and we've been saving for a down payment on this first property for quite a while. And so I thought, well, my money could go further there. I might be able to purchase 2 properties in a year versus just one somewhere else. There are issues with that as well, though, too, as I've discovered. Cheaper properties with lower rent, even if they have a decent cap rate, are more affected by unexpected expenses. So it's all been a learning process. I also made the mistake of finding great cap rates in Memphis and then realizing that they were in neighborhoods that I'm not comfortable investing in yet. Right. And so the real estate agent that I'm working with, he works only with investors, and 99% of them are out of state. And he has his own podcast and had a zip code breakdown. So I found that really helpful in narrowing down what areas to look at. But once those areas that I was initially considering, it was like you would find properties where you would look at the listing and be like, this is a very nice all brick 3-bed 2-bath house for $75,000. And I was like, whoa, it looks nice in the picture. But then when you take into consideration that the rents are lower in those areas and that there's high turnover and a lot of damage from tenants, what I've learned from more experienced investors is that those properties actually lose money.
Right.
So I started shifting and started looking in other areas and had my agent confirm that I was looking in neighborhoods where there was a solid tenant base and also jobs to employ people. Memphis is a very blue collar city. There are a lot of plants and shipping facilities for people to work at, which is awesome because there are employers and that's increasing. Nike just opened up a new facility as well as Amazon.
Oh, Amazon's opened up a place there. That's cool.
Yeah, and the zip code that I love the most is 38128 in Raleigh, which is really close to Amazon and Nike, and there's super high demand for rent, but there are also like 3 properties on the market right now. So I'm gonna have to get creative when it comes to that. But yeah, there's a lot of demand in that area. FedEx is also home in Memphis. That's where their hub is, and there is a lot of transportation that comes in Memphis or out of Memphis and through Memphis. So it's a very industrious city. There are a lot of jobs and people who need good, safe homes that work these jobs. So let's see, where was I?
So this guy's got a podcast about investing in Memphis.
Oh, yeah.
And he did a zip code breakdown. And you realized that the cheapest places aren't necessarily the best ones.
Yes. So there are several neighborhoods that we like and that we're still considering. And the property that we went under contract on is in one of these neighborhoods. And yeah, I guess I kind of found Memphis in a roundabout way. It wasn't what I initially planned on. And I just kept moving kind of further and further away from Nashville, and I just radiated out. But I liked the fact that it has good, solid jobs in a wide variety of industries. And, if one particular employer goes out of business, it's not going to crush that region. And so that's why I'm not investing in the town that I live because the Midwest is very affordable, but there are three main employers where I live. And because this is a smaller area, if, I'm thinking 20, 30 years down the road, what's going to happen here? Because I want to buy and hold these properties long term. These are my retirement. And so I just don't feel secure enough investing here, although it would make things easier in a lot of ways. And so that's why finding an area like Memphis that was both affordable to get in at a specific price point, and then also had a good, solid industry base and people who do rent. So I think the statistics I've heard are that half the people that live in Memphis are renters. So there's a very high demand for rental properties there.
Right, right. And I like what you said about thinking 30 years down the road. Like if you plan on holding this into retirement, then yeah, what are the cities that have staying power? What are the
Right.
cities that are, yeah, exactly. That where in the year 2040, it's going to be just as good of a, or 2050.
Oh my gosh, I haven't
You know,
thought about it like that.
I know,
2050.
right? I know, right? It's one thing to say in 30 years. It's another thing to
Right.
say like in 2051.
That sounds like so far in the future there will be flying cars and colonies on Mars. Oh my goodness.
You'll be like, I got this rental property on Mars with a view of Olympus Mons.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, who knows? That might be the future.
Have you heard about this great Martian tax shelter?
Oh my goodness. That gives a new meaning to boots on the ground, huh?
Right.
That's some commitment, man. Oh my goodness.
So, yeah. So how did I know one of the common questions that I hear from a lot of the students in the Your First Rental Property course, I'm sure you hear this as well, is how do you build a team from afar? Like given that you're out of state, given that you just went to Memphis for the first time, you clearly you'd had an agent there, you had a team there, you had a sense of the neighborhoods there, even without having visited. So how are you able to build that, and how are you able to I guess to know that you could trust them?
Well, I'm still trying to determine that, to be honest. I think it takes time to build that trust. So I've gone about it a few different ways. Some of it is trial and error. I started looking on different, like Memphis real estate Facebook groups for recommendations for agents. I looked on the Bigger Pockets forums for recommendations. And I have found that Memphis is interesting. There is a very strong turnkey presence there. And one of the first agents I called, who was recommended, who's very active in the Bigger Pockets forums, clearly he works with investors. And I called him and asked him, what his business model was. And he told me he was turnkey, which I don't think that was completely clear on the forums. But to be fair, I could have Googled and done a little bit more research myself. But he basically said to me, I'm happy to represent you if you find your own property, and I'm happy to help you take the shotgun approach and put a whole bunch of lowball offers in on properties. But basically, he's looking for properties for his turnkey business, and so he's not going to pass along any deals to me. And
Right.
I appreciated that he was honest and upfront about that, because it was very clear immediately that he was not a good fit. And then I talked to another agent who I thought at first there might be some potential, and she said that her husband invested in rental properties. And but when I asked her, how she would find properties for me, and was she, I think a lot of times students in the course say that they talk to a real estate agent and they simply just set them up with a search on the MLS. And that's not really what they're looking for. They want more personal attention. But she basically said, I'll set you up with a search, but I'm not running comps for you. And so
She's
I
not running
know.
comps for you? That's like the
No.
basic.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, I know. And I think some of that comes with, every time I talked to an agent, I asked them if they would require me to sign an exclusivity agreement, which I'm not opposed to if I found the right agent, but I want to work with them a little bit first to see if it's a good fit and if we're on the same page and if they're bringing me the types of deals that I'm interested in. So I understand her wanting to protect her time. If I had signed an agreement, I don't know, she might have been more willing to pull comps for me. But then when I called the agent that I'm working with, I appreciated that he was familiar with working with investors and was also an investor himself, and he was willing to share his strategy. He's a big BRRRR strategy guy. So I would, at least he was familiar with some of the lingo from the investor world. But I was basically able to tell him, like, I'm not going to go crazy with the BRRRR. If I do it, it's going to be a really slow and calculated BRRRR, and because the risk of ruin is just too high for me personally. If I over leverage myself to that extent. And but he was very understanding. He was like, of course I don't make you sign an exclusivity agreement. And he's like, whoever brings you the deal should get the commission. And he also spends a lot of time sourcing deals that are off market. And so I found that to be valuable. And he immediately sends me comps and his suggested rent for the area and any other like little helpful hints whenever he sends me a property. So as far as trusting him goes, I feel like it's a pretty good fit, although his business model is volume. And so I am like a 1 or 2 property a year customer. So I know that I'm assuming I won't get quite the level of attention that some of his bigger investors from California get. And also I think I'm way more careful with running my numbers than a lot of his other clients who seem to just gobble things up, where I'm running numbers and keeping a spreadsheet on every property he sends me. And I'm like, yeah, these cap rates are not working for me. So.
Right. Well, I like the sound of that last person that you talked to. I love the fact that he doesn't make you sign an exclusivity agreement.
Yeah.
I just closed on a property today.
Woohoo!
Thank you. But yeah, the agent that I worked with, like, it never even came up, the idea of an exclusivity agreement.
Really?
Yeah. The conversation, like, neither of us raised it. So, although in that particular case, I found him, like, I was referred to him from some other investors. So for people who are listening, this property is in Indianapolis. And I traveled to Indianapolis for the first time in my life in January, 2 months ago. And I met a handful of investors there who I met through the Afford Anything community. And it was through those investors that I was introduced to this agent. And it quickly became clear that they're all friends. Like, these investors who are part of the Afford Anything community and this, and this particular agent, like, they're all friends. They all go out drinking together. They've all known each other forever. And so I don't know that we've never talked about it, but I suspect that one of the reasons that the conversation never even came up is there's this like implicit, like when everyone is friends with everyone, like when everyone's drinking buddies with everyone, then you can't just pull the wool over somebody's eyes. You can't just screw them over because they're part of your friend group. Like you all watch the Super Bowl together.
Yeah.
So, you know, and even though I'm not there, even though I live out of state and I'm not part of that friend group, the fact that I came in through the friend group and was known and trusted and, you know, yeah, I think it kind of just created this implicit trust.
Right. Having those connections is really beneficial. And I'm sure it gave you a sense of like security and just peace about it all.
Yeah, exactly. Like because it's relationship driven rather than transactional. So whenever he would show me a property, and I'd ask him for his opinion on it, he would very clearly like he would tell me what he really thought, not what was more likely to give him the sale or get him to a quick close.
Yeah, that's a great sign.
Yeah. Yeah. So like this is the second property that I've been under contract with him on, and the first one that I closed. But the first property, like we went under contract, and so I flew to Indianapolis to look at the property because I was under contract on it. And while I was there, he was like, "What else can I show you to like help you make a decision?" And I was like, "I'd like to see what else is for." Yeah, exactly. And I was like, "I'd like to see what else is currently for sale because I'd like to see what is my opportunity cost? What deals am I passing up on in order to get into this one?"
Yep.
And so he took me to a different duplex in a different part of town, in Meridian Kessler, right by a mile from Butler. And you know, and it was an older property, but I was like, "What do you think of this? And how do you think this compares to this other one?" And he was like, "Honestly, I think that you're going to get more rental demand in this neighborhood." And that, like, I really admire him for saying that because I was under contract on a different property. And so here he is showing me this other duplex and saying, "I think you're going to get more rental demand here in this neighborhood than you would in the Holy Cross neighborhood, which is where I was under contract." Yeah. So yeah. So, I mean, that like bode well. Like it said very good things that he was willing to do all the work of putting me under contract on a property and then take me to a different one and say like, "I think you'll get more demand here."
Yeah, I think the fact that he has your best interest at heart speaks very highly of him.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, was there a difference or a significant difference in the price between the two?
I mean, that was the $1 million question, or specifically that was the $300,000 question. Because the one in Meridian Kessler in the higher demand area was immediately move-in ready. And the other one that I was under contract for was not. It didn't have walls. It didn't have, you know, like it was roughened.
Gotcha.
But it needed drywall. It needed flooring. It needed, you know, it needed all of those pieces. So for me, the big question was, what's it going to cost to get this to the point where it's rent ready? And then what will the final price be? Yeah. And so my trip there was very much a trip of trying to figure out what that was.
Yeah. So. I know sometimes when I'm dealing with salespeople, I kind of gauge like, are they just trying to sell me something that's more expensive that would give them a bigger commission? Or are they truly doing what's in my best interest? So that's just why I asked that question, because I was just curious if there was how that came into play.
Right. No, actually, if based on like the purchase price, so not counting like the cost of repairs to get it rent ready, but purely on the purchase price, which is where his commission would be based on.
Right.
The duplex in Meridian Kessler was cheaper, so his commission would be smaller.
Oh, okay. See?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah,
but
trust is
back.
a really it's a hard thing to acquire and build. For me personally, I don't know a soul in Memphis, so I'm unable to go on the recommendations of people that I know in that area, which is daunting.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
So I'm just kind of doing the best with what I have, and if it doesn't work out, then I will move on to the next option. I'll try again.
It's really cool to hear you say that you went there for the first time and saw in person these neighborhoods that you'd been researching from afar, and you confirmed that the impression that you had of those neighborhoods from afar, like it confirmed with your boots on the ground impression. Um, can you tell me a little bit about like how did you research these different neighborhoods?
There, I have found various zip code breakdowns of Memphis, like some on YouTube, some in my agent's podcast, and then also like a lot of Google Street View
Mm-hmm.
has helped. Those are the primary ways that I've gathered information. And then, one thing that my agent told me that is kind of a standard rule for Memphis that I also used as kind of a filter on the areas I was looking at, was that as long as a property rents for a minimum of $800, you're going to have a solid tenant base. If you go below that, which there are quite a few properties in Memphis that rent for $400, $500, $600, $700, then that's when you come into tenant issues and damage to your property and high turnover and things of that nature. And so, it's kind of like it was several different things. And when you kind of overlaid them all on top of each other, it fit like a puzzle. Like it was just like, okay, yes. So I know that this zip code is near Nike and Amazon. The rents are 800 and above. My real estate agent says this is a great and up and coming area. And then I got there and was like, I love this neighborhood. Like this is exactly, yeah, it's a solid working class neighborhood, but things are well maintained and taken care of. There's not trash in the yard. And so there's neighborhood pride. People are taking care of their homes, whether rented or owned. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. A- and that means a lot. Like when you see a neighborhood where there's like just trash that's left in people's yards
Mm,
versus when you see a neighborhood where um where like even if it's something really simple, people set out like a flower pot or people
yes,
set out like yeah,
yes.
exactly.
Any kind of like landscaping, gardening, lawn ornament, like tasteful lawn ornament, not like
Yeah.
plastic pink flamingos. Although there's nothing wrong with that, but yeah, just those little clues that sometimes, I'm not sure how often Google updates their Street View images, but I'm sure that some time passes and things change. And so, yeah, we actually like drove around and took videos because I knew that like after the fact, I would have a really hard time remembering what was what and the specific details of the streets and the neighborhoods. And so, Thankfully, I had a buddy, and my husband was so kind and like drove me all around Memphis. And I'm sitting in the passenger seat with my laptop, typing all these notes, and then pulling out the cell phone and just recording the streets as we drive by and giving commentary. So I'm sure that will be really useful in the days to come. So if I find a
That's
specific property and I'm like, oh, I don't remember, but I know we drove on that street, let me go look it up.
yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
We spent a
Yeah,
lot
I
of quality time in the car.
did. I did the same thing when I first went to Indianapolis. Like just filming lots of video of myself
Mm,
talking through my impressions of the place.
yes, exactly. Exactly.
A lot of time in the car, a lot even like when I lived in Atlanta and I was investing in a particular part of the city that I had never been to, or honestly that
Mm,
I never even heard of. So
hmm,
technically it is the same metro area, but it was just an area that I had no familiarity with. I
sure.
remember I remember going down there and going just to a fast food place and ordering some fries and sitting there
Mm.
for like 2 hours just people
Oh,
watching.
yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I heard you say that one time. Yeah, and if it weren't for COVID, we would have done
Oh,
that. Um,
yeah.
but another time, I'm sure. And in future, opportunities. I love that. And I think you talked also about seeing the neighborhood at different times of the day.
Yeah, exactly. Seeing the morning rush hour, that
Mm,
was eye-opening for me. I was feeling for this particular neighborhood, I was feeling kind of insecure about it, like, "Oh, I don't know. I don't know anything
mm,
about this." But then, like, purposely going there, like, purposely throwing myself into the morning rush hour mix, which sounds crazy, like, morning rush hour is the thing that most people try to avoid.
right, exactly.
And I like got up earlier than rush hour so that I could drive down there and be there for rush hour.
Mm,
Like
mm.
I was the opposite of what everybody else does. I was like, how do I get maximum rush hour?
And so what
But
did that tell you about that neighborhood?
so like I went like I observed a gas station during rush
Mm,
hour. And I just looked at like what was happening there, like the people coming in, the people who were filling their
mm,
tanks, the people who were walking into the gas station to buy a cup of coffee. Like what were they wearing? How were they dressed? What were they
mm,
talking about? Like
mm,
did did they seem optimistic? Like did they
mm.
seem did was I getting a sense of like joblessness and
Right,
pessimism, or was I getting a
right.
sense of like, another Monday, need my coffee, you know?
Yeah,
So yeah, that was like I definitely like watching that got a sense of like, all right, it's Monday, it's 7 a.m. I need some
yeah,
coffee, I need to fill my tank, gotta go to work, like just so caught up in the daily grind that
yeah.
everything seemed normal, like
Right. That's a good
that's
sign.
exactly what you want to see.
Yep. Yeah, one of the hints that I got from a property manager that I've been talking to is to drive by during the work week, during the work day, and see if there are cars at home or if there are people hanging
Mhm.
out in the yard during normal business hours. Now, of course, again, like with COVID, there are more people working from home. And then I'm
Right.
assuming too, if you're working at a place like the airport or Amazon, you might be working different shifts. So I don't know that that's
Mhm.
entirely accurate. Um, but it was, so we were going to go down during the work week, but because we were under contract, we went down a few days early because we wanted to get down there as quickly as we could, well, during
Mm.
our due diligence phase. And we stayed through the first half of Monday. And so that was one of the tasks that was on our list, was to drive back through some of those neighborhoods during the workday just to see if we noticed anything different. But there wasn't a huge difference, to be honest, from the weekends to the work week. Just more traffic in general. But
Mm.
Yeah, thought that was an interesting thing to think about and watch out
Yeah.
for.
Yeah, that it's a really good tip, and particularly for, of course, like you said, of course it has to be um contextual to the neighborhood. Like,
Yeah.
I remember going on a scouting trip in Birmingham once, and I was looking at an area that's really close to the hospital, where
Hmm.
that's another place where you have a lot of shift work, right?
Exactly.
If you draw on like lots of hospital workers, yeah, sure, people work all kinds of shifts.
Right.
And it's it's not a neatly 9 to 5 profession.
Right.
Um, so, but yeah, but in certain contexts or in certain neighborhoods, that's also just a really good way to get a sense of the flow and the feel of a neighborhood. And
Yeah.
plus, like, no matter where you are, again, COVID disrupts this, but in not
Right.
COVID times, no matter where you are, the school day, like, there is at least going to be a 9 to 5 or 7 to 2,
Right.
7 to 3 rhythm that comes from the school day.
That's
You
true.
know, yeah. So yeah, at a minimum, or I guess, except for the summers, like at a minimum during the school year, you'll
Hmm.
see that
Yeah.
rhythm of like kids going to school, kids coming home from school, and
Yeah.
how does the neighborhood, like, just what do you observe throughout the course of a day? What's the daily rhythm?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We also noticed the condition of the schools in the neighborhoods.
Mm.
There were some neighborhoods where the schools looked really run down. And so, I was concerned about the school district and how many families would want to live near those schools. And then there were other neighborhoods that had nicer public schools and some private school options. And I thought,
Mm.
well, if you're a family looking for multiple options, that would be probably a better choice for you.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's an interesting. How were you able to observe that? Like, was it just driving by the outside of the school? Was it?
Yeah, just the outside. Yeah. But I guess I was a little bit surprised in some areas that were, the residential parts of the neighborhoods were solid and decent, and then the schools just looked more run down than I was expecting them to. Um,
Mm,
I mean, my husband teaches in a lower income district, and their school buildings don't look like that. So I was kind of surprised to see
mm,
that they weren't better maintained.
yeah. Aw, that's that's sad, but but that's information gathering.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. One thing that I've noticed after I started investing in real estate is that it's interest for me. It was interesting to go back to my own, like, neighborhood where I grew up and
Right.
see it through different eyes, like see it through the
Yes.
eyes of an investor.
Yes.
I grew up in Cincinnati, and I went back to, there was one neighborhood I lived in from the age of like 0 to 7, and another where I lived
Mhm.
from 7 to 17. And looking at it through the eyes of an investor, I was like, geez, there are all of these things I never noticed about this place. I don't know if I would
Right.
want to invest here.
Yeah, I think that's something that like has brought me a little bit of comfort as I look at neighborhoods to invest in Memphis, is like the neighborhood that I grew up in Nashville. It was in South Nashville in the city, and I guess I'm not as put off by neighborhoods that look similar to that, because I know that people in that neighborhood that I grew up with, like, they needed good rental homes and they were good people. But I mean, it's definitely an interesting, if you drive down the main streets, and I found Memphis to be similar. If you drive down the main streets, you might be put off by what you see. A lot of used car lots and uh, payday loan places. But then when you drive through the residential areas, they're solid areas.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. And that's where, like, I think one of the big competitive advantages that anyone has or can have in real estate is local knowledge. And that's
Yeah,
one of the things I like about the field of real estate is anyone can develop local knowledge about anywhere. Like
right.
if you dedicate yourself to spending uh a bunch of time just learning a contained geographic area, like
Mm,
you start to really understand the nuances of any given contained geographic area, even if it's 1,000 miles away from where you live.
right.
And the more you understand the nuances of that area, the more you can make like informed investing choices, better
Yeah.
informed investing choices.
Which
And
right
so,
now, with such a hot market, that's a big advantage. If you know where those little pockets are that are fantastic, you don't have to maybe wait to think through it. You can just say, yes, I know that I want that house because I know where it's at, and that's a great street and a great little neighborhood.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, you can make those more instant decisions. Like this property that I closed on today, the
Yeah.
minute that I looked at and I'm by no means an expert in Indianapolis at all. Like, um, I'm still very early on my Indianapolis like knowledge journey, but the minute that I saw the location of this place, I was like, "Yep, want it."
Mm. What about
Yeah.
the location drew you to it?
So I mean, you've lived in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
It's the like Meridian Kessler Sobro area, south of Broad Ripple.
Hmm.
Sobro. um, it's right by the Monon Trail.
Yeah.
I wanted to buy north of 42nd Street.
Hmm. Okay.
And it's north of 42nd, not by a lot, but by enough. Um, and so like it it's an area that has like that's an area that has a lot of duplexes.
Mm.
So living in a duplex in that area is a very normal thing.
Sure.
Um, that is an area that um okay, so it's got a lot of duplexes. It's by the Monon Trail. Like I feel like as Broad Ripple sort of ripples out more broadly, like
That was good.
like you can see like right around 52nd, you can see like that's where it's really nice, and you can see
Hmm.
that start to creep down into the 40s.
Mm, gotcha.
uh, and so I feel like that in you know the broad ripple effect, like it's starting to
Yeah.
send those waves down into the mid to lower 40s, that
Yeah.
range. um so like all of that, it just seemed very well positioned. And I have
Yeah.
friends who I've got like two of the investors that I've met, they have houses that are they both have like rental properties, investment properties that are close to there.
Oh, that's a great
So
resource to have.
yeah, exactly,
Did
exactly.
that help confirm like your estimated rents for that property?
Yeah, in fact, they are both more optimistic than I am. Like I ran all of my numbers
Oh.
assuming rent of 1,400 on each side. And
Hmm.
then this investor who that I know who lives like house hacks in that area. So
Oh,
she knows it
okay.
much better than I do. And she was like, "Oh, conservatively 1,500." And I was like,
Wow.
1,500 is your conservative? Wow. 1,400 is my like, all right, cool. I was going
Yeah.
for 1,400 as a best case, and you're saying 1,500 is conservative. So,
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
so interesting.
yeah. So my numbers are like much more pessimistic than hers.
Yeah.
So that makes me feel extra good about it because like
Yes.
essentially what I think of as like a really good case scenario is for her a pessimistic
A
case.
worst case. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did your real estate agent weigh in on the rent in that area at all?
Yeah, I mean that 1,400 figure, He's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you can easily,
Okay.
there's no doubt in my mind, get that.
Okay.
But he's more in line with her. He's like, I think you can get 1,500 or 1,600 here.
Great.
So yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that's something that has been interesting to me as my agent sends me his estimate for rent. And then as I talk to this property manager, I'm getting a different story. And
Right.
so I've had to go back and change my numbers, especially this house that I was under contract on after I spoke with her because, and oh my gosh, Paula, I was not expecting this at all. I had reached out to a few property managers. One, this is interesting, and I had never come across this before, but one of which told me that they do not work with new investors. You have to have had the property for a whole year before they will work with you because it's just not worth their time dealing with new investors who are upset when they have to repair things.
I've never heard that before, but I like that. If I
Yeah.
ran a property management company, I'd probably do the same thing.
Yeah. And she apologized and she was like, man, I hate having to tell people this, but I had to respect that and appreciate that is what works best for their business. But I attended a virtual REIA lunch one day and got a recommendation for another property manager who I called and basically said, hey, I'm under contract on this property. And she goes, you want me to go look at it? And I said, well, sure. So she went over there and went inside and gave me her feedback. And she was like, this is on the market for way too much. You should not be paying that. I wouldn't pay over this. And then she went down the street and knocked on doors and asked people if they rented or they owned and what they were paying in rent.
Wow.
And she was like, I'm going to get your business. And I was like, well, you just might.
Wow, that
Yeah.
is amazing.
Yes. Yeah, I thought so. I was really impressed at how willing she was to help me out before I've signed anything with her.
Yeah. Wow, that's cool. That's really
Yeah.
cool.
But
Wow.
her rent for that area, it was between 100 and 200 less than what my real estate agent told me. Which if
Mm.
if rent is in the $800 to $1,000 range, that can greatly affect your numbers.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's a bigger
Yeah.
percentage spread.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, that's where this thing is so much, it's like much more of an art than a science,
Yes.
you know? Yeah.
Yeah, I've run
Hmm.
the same property through the analyzing spreadsheet from your first rental property so many times with so many different options to get that range of cap rate and cash flow and just understand if I'm comfortable with that worst case scenario.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and as long as you can tolerate the worst case, you don't have to like it, but if you can tolerate it, if you can stomach it, then you know that at least you're protected from that risk of ruin. You're protected from the
Right,
worst case.
right.
So, all right, cool. Well, thank you so much, Alyssa, for this chat.
Yeah, this was fun.
Cool. Awesome. I'm glad to hear it. And I'm excited for the next semester of your first rental property.
Me too.
So, cool. All right. Well, I'll talk to you later.
Sounds good. Take care.
All right. You too. Bye.
Bye.